record, and we're... Hi, this is Jim the Keys Bartender. I'm here with Emily Pearson, known as E.T. Pearson. I thought it was an interesting name that you had there, Emily.
Thank you. It's actually just my initials.
Well, what's it, Emily Teresa?
Oh, Taylor, actually.
Emily Taylor. Okay. Pretty name. And
thank you.
Where are you from?
I am from San Antonio, Texas, born and raised. I also have family in the Virgin Islands, so I spent my summers growing up working out there as soon as I was 14, and they could pay me under the table. So I got my start young.
What kind of work were you doing what business did your family have in the Virgin Islands, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, I actually got really lucky in this industry. My grandfather owns some country western nightclubs here in Texas, and he started some businesses in St. Croix in the Virgin Islands, the one that I worked at being a sports bar. So my parents thought it would be good for me, and it was, for me to work my summers during my teenage years. So I'd do things from cooking in the kitchen in the morning, getting off, taking a break, and then serving food. And they didn't let me start bartending out there until I was 17.
So is that business still there?
It is. It's called Sharky's Sports Bar.
Thank you. That's exactly what I do. So it's Sharky's Sports Bar, and it's in St. Thomas?
St. Croix in the Virgin Islands.
Oh, that's great. Well, we can send a shout out to them. So you started out in San Antonio. You would spend your vacations there?
Correct. I'd spend my summers there for like 2.5 months.
Oh, that's great.
Not a bad place to be.
I used to spend my summers when I was young in North Carolina. I'm from Philadelphia originally, and my aunt and uncle had a campground. So it wasn't as exciting as being in St. Croix.
It sounds like still a great experience.
It was, but I was at a fish out of water being a city boy, working on a campground in North Carolina. So you grew up in San Antonio, and the image I have of San Antonio, I think about the Riverwalk, and it has a really great restaurant scene there, right?
Absolutely. It is blowing up right now. All kinds of people are moving to the city, and it's only expanding.
Oh, great. And so you went to school in San Antonio, and you spent your summers in St. Croix. So when you came back when you were 17, 18, what happened?
Back to San Antonio or St. Croix?
Yeah, how did you get your start working outside the family business? Where did you go to there?
Actually, my first bartending job was for my family here in San Antonio at the Midnight Rodeo. I got especially lucky because my first manager was my dad. So what they did was, after I graduated high school, they said this will be the perfect job for you to do while you go to college. And I'm still going to college several years later. So when I was 17, they had me cashiering. And then when I was old enough to handle alcohol at 18, they moved me through the ropes so I could get a bigger understanding of, the operation as a whole. So I went from cashier to busboy to cocktail waitress to barback, and then I worked a beer tub. And then when they felt I was finally out of my shell a little bit and ready for, the big leagues, they started me training behind the bar.
What kind of place is this?
It's a high-volume country western nightclub.
Okay, kind of like not a roadhouse, right?
Right. It's the size of an acre.
Wow.
And my grandpa's specialty is it started in the 80s, 82 it was opened. And he coined the dance, a racetrack style dance floor.
Okay.
And so back then in the 80s, they had nightclubs with DJs and they had dance halls with live music, but they did not have a dance hall with a DJ. So he found his niche and he's been running with it ever since.
I remember in the 90s, they actually started doing in the bigger cities like Baltimore, New York, Philadelphia, had them, those kind of places with a really big country western theme, dance floor, guys get dressed up, I guess the chance to wear a cowboy hat and the western gear in Philadelphia was few and far between. But you're in Texas. And
yeah.
They're wearing that anyway.
Oh yeah, not as regularly as you might think if you don't live in Texas. Everybody thinks we all wear cowboy hats all the time, but it really depends on the region that you're in. If you're in West Texas on the ranch, you're always in your cowboy hat.
Well, what I mean to say is, if you're in Miami, walking down the street in cowboy gear and stuff like that, you tend to stand out a little more.
Oh, yeah.
Like, if you're in New York City, you're more likely, if you're wearing a cowboy hat, you're thinking about the guy that's playing the guitar in his underwear.
Yeah.
You know about that guy?
I've seen videos.
Okay, yeah. So, it's more likely. I'm just saying, if you're going to look at, someone dressed up with, like Ben Franklin, to be in Philadelphia, or someone dressed up like John Adams. Not that anybody would know what John Adams actually looked like. I mean, they do know what he looked like, but so you just got. It seemed like you were shunted in that. What are you going to school for right now?
I am majoring in business because my dream is to own my own bar or restaurant someday.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's going to directly factor into one of the last questions. So how old are you now? 23?
24 recently.
Okay. So you have, for someone so young, you have a very extensive experience and depth for being a bartender. Usually if you run to someone that's 24, they've been doing it for a year or two.
I was very blessed. Yeah. Got very lucky.
So I'm not going to ask the question why a bartender, because it seemed like that was destined. I'm going to ask you your best. First, we'll ask you your worst day. Pick your worst day out. We start out with your worst, but we're going to finish with your best. Your worst bartending experience, and it could be a fail. It could be just a situation. It could be your coworkers. What happened?
When I first started, I hadn't quite gotten my skin toughened yet. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I remember one time, a customer just being really aggressive with me and yelling at me because I wasn't fast enough or something. I couldn't even tell you what it was about. And I started to get emotional. And I was really lucky because my other manager, besides my dad at the time, he just came back there and was like, hey, go take a smoke break. I got this. You're good. Before that, the most upsetting thing that probably happened to me was when I was 18 and working the beer well. I had a guy come up and order a beer. Everything was normal. And then his friend followed up, and he immediately, tried to put some money in my bra. And I was just like, whoa, man, you only get one warning. You are not allowed to touch me. Don't you dare. And then he's like, oh, okay, I'm sorry. Let me get a Bud Light or something. So the way it's set up, I have to turn around, bend over, reach for the beer. As soon as I bend over, he takes his beer bottle and sticks it between my legs.
Wow.
And luckily, the beer well's right by the door, and they had police officer security at the time. So before I could even turn around, the cops grabbed him and pulled him outside. It was pretty late in the evening, so we shut the beer well down early. I went in the back, did my money, collected myself. Then my dad comes out and he's like, "Hey, the police want to talk to you." And so I go out there and they're like, "Do you want to press charges on him?" And I was like, "Oh, I don't know about all that. That seems really serious. Let me think about this for a second." So I went up to his group of buddies, about 4 of them, and I was just like, "Hey, is this a regular occurrence for him? Does he do this kind of thing everywhere y'all go?" And they were like, "Yeah, it's a problem. And, he's always acting like this." And I was like, "You know what? It sounds like he does need to learn a lesson." So I went ahead and pressed charges on him. And 6 months later, I got a call from a lawyer that was like, "Do you need to file for any kind of monetary damages?" And I was just like, I don't want any money out of this guy. I just want it on record that this is his behavior. I want him to have to be on some kind of probation or something so that there are consequences for his actions, and he understands he can't just treat people like that everywhere that he goes.
You know what? That I've seen poor behavior like that, and that's the exact right thing to do. And it's a perfect timing to mention it. What's going on nowadays with the boys will be boys kind of attitude.
Yes, exactly.
And
the best part about being a bartender sometimes is that there's 2 or 3 feet of bar between you and the people that you're serving.
Yes. And you know what? That's a lot of times. I think a couple shows I talk about it when you're working. I was asking Melissa last week about it. When you're nice to someone, and I guess it has to be more poignant for a young woman or woman, that some guys just don't get it. It's congeniality. It's professional congeniality. You know what I'm saying? That you're being nice as a host. I'm being nice to you as a host. Don't read any more into it than it is.
I've gotten to the point where when people try to ask me for my number or something at work, if it's in front of their friends, my go-to line is like, "Don't be that guy." I'm working right now.
What if it's not in front of them? What do you say if you're not in front of their friends?
"Hey, man, I'm just here to give you good service. I have a boyfriend. Not that that should be an excuse, but just let me do my job. I'm trying to work here."
No, exactly. For people that think that it's anything more, I think that's important. And you know what? Not that you need my confirmation, but you did the right thing. When someone keeps doing a pattern of behavior where they do the same thing, you got to bookmark it by lodging a complaint, because there's people that feel entitled that can do those things.
And they just never get any consequences to teach them otherwise.
Yes. They don't.
So I appreciate that.
You appreciate having the...
your confirmation.
Oh, well, I think part of it was, for me, was becoming a husband and father and being... I think it doesn't make... I'm not trying to be a better person. I'm just trying to be empathetic with how other people feel and put myself in their position. And I understand what it feels like, more so when I was younger. And it wasn't a problem, when guys are... they're socialized differently when they're younger, and I think we haven't learned the lesson that, hey, how about treating someone with a little respect and, giving them their space and stuff like that. They're treating their job with dignity, right?
Right.
And just because someone's working at a bar, a server, and then you're drinking, you have that lowered inhibition. Your people just have to learn that, people just don't kill people when they're drinking because you get angry. They shouldn't feel they should be able to sexually harass somebody.
Exactly.
And I know I'm preaching to the choir, but you said it was important, and I wanted to spend some time on that. And whether, most of the time we do comedy and stuff like that, but when it comes to important things, we'd like to, if that's the kind of humor someone has, then they can go someplace else.
Agreed. I
Yes.
do not need that.
Yes.
Because the way it's been said to me is, if they're talking to you and treating you like that, then odds are they're talking to your customers and treating them like that too.
Exactly.
And it's a toxic thing to have in your bar.
Mm-hmm.
I had a guy one time who came up to the bar, never seen him before. He was like, "I'm from Louisiana, blah, blah, blah." And all of a sudden he's like, "I'd like to know what your pussy tastes like." And I just flipped the switch to call over a manager. And the manager at the time was my dad.
Yeah.
And I told him what he said. And he just grabbed a security guy, walked up to him and was like, "Hey, I know what you said to her. It's time to go." And
Wow.
he's like, What do you mean? I didn't say anything. And he's like, "Man, that's my minor daughter. Let's go."
Yeah.
Now, I'm not sure, if I was anywhere else, I would get that kind of support from a manager. So I was very lucky at the time.
I feel that
Because
way. I feel the way about my patrons. I can't imagine what it would be, how amped up it would be if it was someone I was related to. But if it's a patron, a coworker, I just know that, if you're disrespectful, and there's some a rare occasion, certain women mirror the behavior thinking it's suitable. And I'm not hurt because I don't feel as if I'm victimized. I'm 6'4", 250 pounds. But I'll just say, that's not appropriate. Come on, let's knock it off. We have a good time here. We'll have a little go back and forth, but let's not get gratuitously filthy, And we're going to do, Emily, I want you to know, we're going to do a live show from an adult store near here.
Nice.
Yeah, but that's the consenting adult thing, right? That's not that where you impose yourself on somebody. And that, I understand that because I have friends, we went back and forth, there's an agreement, you're going to talk that way. And, when someone comes up and says, I'm going to want to know how and I'm not going to say it, tastes like. I heard, some guy on, Emily, what, you belong to some of the bartending sites, right? Like the Snarky Bartender or Bartenders United?
We've got a San Antonio group here, too, that's really taken off. It's called Bottle Swingers.
Okay.
And then the Angry Bartender, the Fraternal Order of Bartenders, things like that.
Well, one of the women on the groups I belong, some guy walked up and said, "How's your pussy?" And I go, "Wow, really? That's going to be a opening line?" And I mean, that's right then when someone says something like that, it's over. Like if someone says, if someone says the N-word, to
over.
me, right? I
Yeah.
go, hey, the conversation's over and your possibility of being served is done.
Yeah.
You just you didn't even get a feel for me yet. You just went right into it. Now, if a girl went up to me and said, "How's your dick?" and I'm like, "Oh man, that's just too familiar and we're not friends." I could do it. I could say it to them. I said, "We're not friends." And I don't have a friend that we talk that way. My wife can talk that way to me about it. Um,
And that's as long as that list goes.
yeah. No, well, I mean, my doctor can too. I have a nurse practitioner. I don't think she'd ever say that. I mean, if she ever said one day and said, "Hey, Jim, how's your dick?" I go, "You mean prostate?" Did you mean that?
Are you okay?
Yeah. Are you having a seizure? No, she's an awesome. She never said that to me. So,
I hope not.
yeah. Oh, since we and if you want to get back to this stuff, it's really important. And I think it's important that we hammer this in. I don't mind doing a whole show about that, Emily, about misogyny, harassment, and all those things. And if you follow my podcast, I tendency not to do that. In April or March, it was International Women's Day, and my wife is Polish, and it's a big holiday in Europe, and it's starting to get to be a little holiday here in the United States. So we did a show because Bill, my co-host, and Luke, they look like hillbillies, right? But they're pretty progressive. And they're both musicians. So we're talking about how, to properly treat women, and I did like dating tips for guys, how to behave. And right at the end of the show, I'm signing off, and Luke has a song. And for some reason, Luke is super progressive. He's all for rights and stuff, but he has a song. He goes, "I love pussy." And he starts singing it at the end of it. And I said, "Luke, I think it's all right that you have a song that does that, but I don't think it's appropriate at the end of the International Women's Day podcast that you're going to sing this song."
That's not the message.
Yeah, it's not. It's not the one thing, and you just say that. I understand you're an artist. You can say those things, and you don't harass women. You don't do this. You don't do that. But at the end of that one, you just don't do it then, right? So
yeah, poor places.
Yeah. So I'm gonna move along. We'll move off the genital discussion. We can always go back to it, but as a bartender, just as the job as a bartender, Emily, what pisses you off the most? Is it a coworker or patron, something they do? Some people hate being set up from the night before, or the way they order a drink, or is there one thing that comes to mind that bothers your sensibility as a bartender?
A couple things come to mind.
Let's go.
When you ask somebody how they are and they just shout their order at you. When people look at me, I'm 24 years old, I'm blonde. Off the bat, they don't automatically give me their respect. A lot of the times, they treat me like I'm an idiot. So then from there, I have to show them that I'm not an idiot. I've been doing this several years. When they ask me, do you know how to make a Vegas bomb? Yes, girl, in my sleep I know how to make a Vegas bomb. And then they see the way I work for a minute, and they're like, oh, okay, she knows what she's doing. The other thing would be, when your coworker isn't pulling their weight. When you're running circles around them and they're just talking to their favorite regular, or they keep taking smoke breaks, or, personally, from working in a corporate environment, getting my foundation there, I don't drink while I work. I believe that, what we do is a very serious job. We're giving people a very powerful liquid. And my coworkers, my customers, my bosses all deserve for me to be 100%, in control of the situation while I'm working. And if I have a coworker that's getting sloshy, that pisses me off. Because it shows me that...
You've ran into that before, right?
Of course. Leaving, my family's business, it's hard to find a bar where they don't let you drink on the job. And a lot of people take advantage of that. And there are a lot of people in our industry who have the job because it can support a lifestyle where they can drink on a nightly basis or drink while they work, and they give us a bad name. Because, there's nothing worse when you're out and you're trying to have a good time and your bartender doesn't pay attention to you because they're more worried about their own drink than making yours.
I've seen it where I'm waiting to get service and they're doing shots with someone down at the end of the bar. And I'm like, oh, well, I mean, at the place I work at, the end when the kitchen closes at 10 o'clock, we start our closing thing. I mean, we could have people for another hour and a half, but around 10 o'clock, it's actually a rule. Like, that's when you get one drink for a shift or two drinks if you had a double. And,
that's a good rule.
Yeah. And a lot of people do tend to abuse that at other places. They come in. I worked with a guy who he passed away a year and a half ago. He came in. He had stayed out the night before, and he was doing some other things other than drinking. Fell asleep outside the bar when it closed down at like 5, and went back in when it opened at around 7. And he went back home at 1 and had to be in work at 4. And he just laid on the back of our prep table in the back of the restaurant. And the guy just kind of was almost passed out. And I looked at that. I myself was sober for 7 years when I came down to Key Largo, 3 months after I came down because I had a drinking problem. I bartended and never had a drink for 7 years.
That's amazing, Jim.
It was. I think it speaks more to how much of a problem I had before then. And it sounds like you really have a good grasp on the business and the right amount of moderation. Turn it over to you.
Well, even personally, like in the occasions where, I've tried the drinking on the job thing, my service goes downhill real fast. If you're working an 8-hour shift and you haven't eaten in 6 hours and then you think that you can drink like your customers do, then, you take one shot, then I can't just take one shot, Jim. Like, that's not, I'm one of those breeds. It's not possible. So I know myself too well to open up that door. And I think that that's the case for a lot of people. Suddenly,
So you're taking the potato chip analogy, because no one goes up and says, "Would you like a potato chip?"
Exactly. Once it pops that top, there's no stopping.
Yeah, one's not enough, and 20 is too many. So
yeah, and I've the night that I tried that, I know that my customers did not get a good experience. I know that the person who had to open the next day was not happy with how I left things, and it's a pretty shameful feeling. It's just not worth it to me, and I'm sure you can understand. I'm too scared to open that door to see what will happen.
I've been there. You know what? Since we covered some of the negative, we got all positive stuff, which is good. Uh, what the most favorite person you see regularly or the first time? Let's say it could have been a celebrity or someone you see your favorite regular who gave you the most joy, overall well-being. Can you recall someone?
When I was living in Houston, I had a regular. She's an older woman. She goes by Wilson. She was there on a pretty nightly basis, and she was one of those regulars that turned into your best friend, you know. And the nights that she wasn't there, it'd be like, damn, where's Wilson? Because she was just the type of person that brought the whole bar together. And if you were having a bad day, you could talk to her about it. If you're having a good day, she would share your joy with you. She had that old Katie sense of humor and like that small town wit. And
that's what I was. Those kind of things is one that that really lasts. Not that every so often you have a person said, one time I had Dan Marino come in, and I go, okay, that's great, But
it's the regulars that make your job worth coming back to.
Mm-hmm.
If I just have to deal with the fuckers, then I would be pretty miserable at the end of the night.
There are the miserable people that keep on coming back sometimes, don't they?
Absolutely.
And for some reason, what?
I mean, our customers, especially the ones that come in on a nightly basis, they're an inherently lonely people, because you got to think there's a reason why they're in the bar alone every night, why they don't want to go home and be alone. And part of our jobs is to, make people happy and feel welcome somewhere. And there are very few lines of work where you can offer that and have the chance to really connect with people and at times find out their most intimate details of their life.
There's a gentleman that comes in my bar, and he writes code. He's a couple years younger than me, and he writes code on his computer, and then he watches videos. He has the headphones on the whole time, and he may drink a decent amount of vodka tonics, and he never bothers anybody. He's not creepy, and some of the girls started saying they felt some bad vibes, and I said, is it because he's just sitting there on the computer? And they go, yeah. And I said, I've looked at the videos he's looking at and the things he's doing and the stuff he's saying. I don't necessarily see anything that's creepy. So I kind of put it to rest. I said, he doesn't leer at you girls. He doesn't bother anybody else. He just does his own thing. And I think he comes in just to be around other people. Are you there?
And and that's part of our job, is to give kind of a second home to people.
Yeah.
As long as they aren't making anybody uncomfortable or threatening, you never know what's going on in somebody's life or why they are the way that they are. And as long as they aren't, malicious or have mental problems, then they are always welcome.
Listen,
and as long as they don't sit right in front of my well.
I have a question about your significant other. You have a boyfriend right now, right?
I do.
Now, this isn't going to be intrusive, the question. Have you ever had, or do you feel weird when they come in while you're working? And is there a situation that makes you uncomfortable?
I say that he's more uncomfortable about it than I am because I'm busy working, and I'm not one of those that flirts with my customers. Like,
Mm-hmm.
they know exactly where we stand, and I talk about my boyfriend all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But he, from an observer standpoint, gets to see, the way that people look at me or overhears friends talking to each other and making comments about my appearance or things like that. And, it's just a matter of time before I can see the look on his face, like he's not happy. So unless he's picking me up or dropping me off, he pretty much stays away.
Yep. I have a beautiful wife. She's tall and stunning. And whenever she comes in, there'll be guys and stuff like sitting there. If I don't, sometimes I feel, what would you call it, possessive.
It's hard not to.
Yeah, it's hard not to, but it's also you want to be evolved, realizing and say, listen, she chose me, right? If she's actually looking for someone, then I lost the battle anyway. There's nothing I could do about it. That's the way I know. This is the logical part, my prefrontal lobe talking and saying, hey, if I'm fighting it at the end, I wasn't good enough at home or anything like that. That's the part I say, hey, just let it be. And I never liked that when I dated some women years ago, and they liked you to see you jealous. And I realize now that's not a relationship.
That's immature.
Yeah, well, it's a need. It's a fundamental need. But it's good to hear that, it sounds like for someone relatively young, you're very experienced, you have a very mature look on it. I know people that are 50 and 60 years old, and they don't have a balanced outlook. I deem to be a balanced outlook that you have, Emily. This is going to be a weird frou-frou question. It's almost like that. You ever hear of this guy inside the actor's studio?
No.
Okay. His name was James Lipton, and he used to have these questions. He'd have actors come in. He asked them a bunch of questions like De Niro, Kate Winslet, and stuff like. And he'd ask, like, if you were a tree at the end, what kind of tree would you be, and all that stuff. Well, this is kind of my homage to him. If you were a drink, what would you be? What kind of ingredients would you have in it? Would you be like a martini type drink or a what?
I think I'd be a mojito.
A mojito?
Because I'm challenging yet refreshing.
Wow, you answered that. That's a home run. Wow. That was really good, Emily.
Thanks.
Yeah. Well, I like that. I'm more like a bourbon neat, I'd have to say, and that's my favorite drink, but it's pretty much what I am. So you answered about your significant other. I want to ask this question, Emily. 10 years from now, where do you see yourself?
I would like to be a few years into my own business. I'd like in 10 years to have a bar or a bar and grill that is finally getting established. Like, has a reliable staff that I love, is making a name for itself, and is building a business based on honesty and a good reputation, and having myself a second little bar family. Personally, I'd like to be done with my degree in a couple of years, starting a family somewhere in between that, but that's a little out of my control in that regard. But when I'm done with school, I'd like to be putting my business plan together and looking for investors, and then starting construction.
Okay. That's a thorough answer. I want to give a plug to where you're working right now. What's the name of the place?
It's called Mitchell's Sports Bar.
Mitchell's?
It's a neighborhood bar that's been there about 20 years, run by a husband and wife that I really like. Some of the nicest people I've ever worked for.
Let's give the address where it is.
It is at Northwest Military and Lock Hill, Selma, and the address is 1923 Lock Hill, Selma Road.
Okay, that's in Houston?
San Antonio.
San Antonio. Okay.
And outside of that, I work at a couple of staffing agencies, like you said, doing banquets and weddings and sporting events and concerts, because I like to keep things interesting and never stop learning and try new things.
Well, I worked at a big catering hall in Philadelphia, so I think that's what you're doing is very interesting, going to different venues and stuff, because going to doing an outside job, you never know what they have, where is this going to be, what challenges you're going to face. When we're in-house, we knew where everything was and everything you had to do and all that stuff. I was one of the managers, maitre d's, so I knew it from top to bottom. But when you show up at a place, I hand it to you. That is challenging.
I love to adapt to a new situation. It's one of my favorite things.
Yeah. I thought I'd have a harder time when I called today when I said E.T., and I'm thinking, I'm going to ask her I was thinking it's Emily, and I think I saw that, but I'm saying maybe she doesn't want to say her name. And you just went up, oh, I'm Emily. So I thought that was going to be the most challenging thing.
That's one of those things to prevent every customer from adding me on Facebook.
Oh, great.
You know what I mean?
Well, I think E.T.
You meet
do
a
you
lot
ever
of
get
people.
that? Do you ever get that when people play on words with the E.T. thing?
A little bit, yeah. And
Okay.
it's a good way to decipher who I know in real life and who only knows me from my online presence.
Oh, good. Okay. I didn't know if it was a fake persona or not until he called. I mean, I thought when the messages went back and forth, and I said, oh, well, this is a real person. It's not a Russian troll, that's hacked into, got a bunch of pictures. And normally they just put 2 pictures. I get friend requests from women, and there's 2 pictures or 1 picture, and I go, wow.
20 friends.
Yeah, that's a fake person.
They're pretty easy to spot.
Yeah, or they'll use they went to high school in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and their college is in Malaysia. And I said, no. New York, I can see if you're New York, maybe going to Malaysia. Maybe. But not Tulsa, Malaysia. I'm sorry, it's not. Or the other way around. But
you're a quick one, Jim.
It took me a while. You got to remember, I'm older, Emily. So I kind of realized I have a healthy self-conceit. I realize I'm 55 years old. When a young woman's talking to me and she's being friendly, she's more likely thinking, oh, he reminds me of one of my favorite uncles or my dad. And I see that. And I'm a fitness instructor, too. I'm a spin instructor at a gym. So when I'm talking to them, and I realize when guys try to, feel liked by younger women, they're kind of feeling a lack.
Yeah, something's missing.
Something's missing. And if you're comfortable with yourself, you should say, hey, listen, I am who I am. This is who I am. And I don't have to be that way. And I think you're way advanced. It took me years to learn this. I mean, that's life, just learning, and that 7 years I spent sober and all that stuff kept me um, straight. But knowing someone like you also helps. And I want to thank you for talking to us today.
Thank you for having me, Jim. It's been a pleasure.
My pleasure. And you're going to send me a photo that you're happy with. I just don't want it to seem creepy, but that I could put on the cover of it. Or just tell me one. If you want the one from Facebook on there, I'll put that on there if you like.
That'd be just fine. Any of my pictures are appropriate.
Okay.
I'd also like to give a shout out to my grandfather's company here, because if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be half the person that I am today.
What's your grandfather's name?
His name is John McCormick, and his bars here in San Antonio are the Midnight Rodeo and Wild West. And they do honest work. They care about their employees and their customers, and everything is by the book, professional, which leaving his, under his wing, it's pretty hard to find an environment like that.
So we got the Midnight Cowboy and the Wild West in San Antonio.
Midnight Rodeo.
Midnight Rodeo. Jeez, I got that movie. I just saw that movie for the first time like a year ago. So, and not anything to do with that the bars there. Did you ever see that movie?
Urban Cowboy? Oh, yeah.
No, Midnight Cowboy.
I have not seen that.
It is kind of depressing, so you could just dump that one from your memory. It is depressing. Just forget about it. Midnight Rodeo. The Midnight
If I need a good cry, I'll check it out.
Oh, it's not. Yeah, it is cry at the end. It's John Voight and Dustin Hoffman when they were young. So don't forget I even mentioned it. But I'm glad. So John McCormick, and it sounds like you love your grandpa. He's one of those younger grandfathers, right? He's probably like 70, right?
He is 78, and he refuses to retire.
Yeah.
He's gonna work until he dies.
That sounds like my dad. My dad's 76, 77 right now. So.
Oh, you had a young dad.
Oh, you compare? Yeah. So. Yeah, if you ever watch Seinfeld, they had the Mandelbaums, and it was the father, the son, and the grandfather all look like they're within 5 years of age. So Mandelbaum, that's us. Okay, well, Emily Pearson. It was, you know what? And I'm sure we're going to talk to you. Maybe one time we could do a holiday show. And have you on and talk about one of your holiday rituals down in San Antonio.
That sounds like fun.
Okay. I appreciate.
Have me back whenever you'd like. I enjoyed this.
Or reach out whenever you want to talk about something if you have an issue or something like that. I would happily dedicate a show to. I want to get, if I could figure out how to do a conference call. I would do one on harassment behind the wood. I guess we'd call it, because that's what they call the bar top. And
yeah.
So we could get that.
I've got plenty of experiences for that.
Yeah.
Whenever you're ready.
Yes.
I could write a book on it.
Hey, listen. I'm not frightened by women being great bartenders and stuff like that. So I think that's the reason why we had so many young women. They're a little bolder and confident than a lot of people, so they're willing to come on air more often. So
also, from my friends that are male bartenders, it seems to be a lot harder for them to find a gig than it is for a woman, and I don't think that that's fair whatsoever.
Yeah, I hate to say, I don't want to say, but once you're really established, like I'm established in Key Largo, I can get a bartending job anywhere. Once they know your name, in a smaller, Key Largo is a well-known town, but it's not that big a town. So whenever I go someplace, everyone knows who I am. And not because of the podcast. So, in a big city, I can understand that would be an issue, you know. So.
Yeah, it's a struggle, especially for minority men, unless you find a bar that, you know, specializes in a certain type of theme.
I can see that. I can appreciate that, how that would be difficult for somebody like that. So I gotta. Well, you know what? That's going to be another topic for the show. Maybe I'm gonna look out for. I have a friend who's Nicaraguan, but he's really. I mean, he's well known. I will keep that in the idea tank for that. Thank you, Emily.
All right.
Okay.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jim.
Okay, this is me signing off, thanking Emily Pearson.
Thank you, and have a good one.
You too.